Welcome to the Innovator, where we take an in-depth look at accountable innovation in higher education with college and university presidents who are committed to the success of their students. I'm your host, Wesley Smith. I serve as the executive director of the President's Forum, an association of higher ed leaders who are dedicated to the reinvention of higher education. Our guest today is Ivy Tech Community College President Sue Ellspermann. President Ellspermann has an incredible wealth of experience. She's been in her current role as president of the institution since May of 2016. And prior to that position, she was Lieutenant Governor Ellspermann, serving as Indiana's 50th Lieutenant Governor. And prior to that, she had the now familiar title of President, as she served as the President of the Indiana Senate. President Ellspermann has implemented a 5-year strategic plan at Ivy Tech, where her vision is for Ivy Tech students to earn 50,000 high-quality certifications, certificates, and degrees per year aligned with the workforce. She is really a force in higher education. We're fortunate to have her with us today. Our conversation was recorded earlier today. We talked about her path to her current role, the innovation that's going on at Ivy Tech to implement her strategic plan and to align those students with workforce needs, and how she believes the work of the President's Forum can improve higher education. Here's our conversation with Ivy Tech President Sue Ellspermann. Good morning, President Ellspermann. How's Indiana today?
It is a beautiful day in Indiana. We are enjoying beautiful weather for the middle of August.
Remind me, you've got a lot of experience in this. Remind me, when does your legislative session meet? Are you at the beginning of the year?
We are annual short session this year, January to March, and long session, budget session every other year, January through April.
Is that this year, the budget session?
Last year.
Okay, so you got a little bit of a year.
We have a light one coming.
All right, that's fantastic. Well, let's get right into some of these questions. I want to help our audience get to know you a little bit better. Tell us initially, how did you come into your current position? What were the dominoes that fell to have you as the president of Ivy Tech Community College?
Yeah, the last couple of reverse dominoes was Lieutenant Governor of Indiana. So visiting all 92 counties, feeling like I'd met 6.8 million Hoosiers over 4 years. Really committed me to the importance of community college and a statewide system like Ivy Tech. Prior to that, I was an elected official, so I made some of the problems at the legislature so I understood the role that the legislature plays in supporting higher education. And prior to that, I served 6 years in one of our comprehensive institutions in Indiana.
So as the lieutenant governor, I've got to imagine that, working in the administration, that you had a lot of overlap with higher education. And at some point, somebody approached you and said, hey, Lieutenant Governor, you would make a fantastic institution president when you complete your service here. Is that how that rolled out? And it was just a natural roll into the Ivy Tech role?
Yeah, just about. I had served as the vice chair of the Indiana Career Council as lieutenant governor. Of course, I had experience in higher ed, built Indiana's strategic plan,
right.
And then as Ivy Tech's president was preparing to retire, I was approached, and then I had to convince my governor, Mike Pence, that the better seat on the bus for me was to run this nation's largest system and do that for the benefit of Indiana, and thankfully he agreed.
Okay, so as you took over in that role, you had some things that you wanted to accomplish in this presidency. Tell us about that. What did you want to accomplish? What are you focused on now?
Right, so we as a state had adopted the Lumina goal, 60% of our workforce having a post-secondary degree or credential by 2025. We weren't close. I knew that Ivy Tech was critical to that. Also, you could see the evolution of shorter-term credentials coming in, and that was incredibly important. And then, of course, making sure that first-generation students of color, those who had not had an opportunity to really participate in higher ed, we had to hit on all cylinders. And in our rural communities, which a lot of Indiana is rural, just as importantly as in our very urban centers like Indianapolis and Gary, Indiana, right? So
Right.
it was understanding the importance of bringing everyone into that workforce for those good opportunities.
Okay, so I mean, there's a huge focus from Ivy Tech on workforce alignment. And so that comes from a lot of the work that you had participated in the administration. And once you become the president of an institution, you can now pull some levers that you may not have been able to pull as directly in the administration. And you get into that role and you start saying, okay, we have to align with these workforce needs. How
Well,
does
I had worked with our economic development agencies as lieutenant governor, but I also am an engineer by degree. So I'd
okay,
worked in manufacturing. I had worked consulting with small, medium, large businesses for 20 years prior to that. So I really come from a workforce training, skills development background and able to marry that with the mission of Ivy Tech, which is incredibly important. I mean, all higher ed is important, but the role that community colleges play in America is very unique in the world, and it has to be fully leveraged. And when you have an institution that you can scale that with, that's where Ivy Tech really plays well.
so you've clearly done a great job on the workforce alignment. Another thing that you've recently had some kudos for is the employer status of Ivy Tech. You have a lot of employees that are engaged in this work, and I think Forbes recognized you for the second year in a row as a great employer. Tell us a little bit about how you approach that work. What makes Ivy Tech a great employer?
I'd like to say it's me, but I think it's the mission of the college when we can lean into doing something that is so right for people, so right for our communities, so right for our state. It is, I would say, the majority of us carry this now as a vocation. And my job as, chief executive is to just clear the path, allow the best talent to do the innovative things that they and we together can do like no one else. We already had this very humble attitude and culture. What I wanted to bring was innovation into that. I knew the talent was here, but creating the toolkits, the opportunities, and then truly unleashing that innovation was important. And I think people here, I believe, they know they can make a real difference, and we're going to lean in. We're going to take a big mountain like every day. That's kind of the goal here. And that attracts a certain kind of people, right?
Yeah, they want to be involved in the process.
We like to win.
Yeah.
We like to do big things, and we like to win, and we like to know that those wins are directly helping people. And,
I think it's really motivational. Yeah, when you have that kind of a vision, it is motivational. You're saying, hey, I'm doing good in the world, and not just a little bit of good. We have our sights set on some big mountains that we're climbing, so that's kind of a fun thing. And I know this, but maybe a lot of our listeners don't, but the President's Forum, one of the premises of the President's Forum is thinking about students first. Give us some insight onto how that student first philosophy manifests itself at Ivy Tech. How do you put students first?
Yeah, it literally in everything. It is in our goals, which is like making that student experience very seamless. Like we don't serve the traditional residential 4-year student. We always remember we're serving a single mom, we're serving a first generation student, we're serving adult learners, we're serving dual credit students in high schools.
Right.
And when we keep that front of mind and are operating with those students every day, that's what helps us to do better work. And then we measure everything. We have data we can disaggregate at every level, on every campus, and know, are those students persisting? And retention is our big goal. We talk about our new strategic plan. Yes, we still have the vision of 50,000 completions aligned to Indiana's workforce, which means 50,000 good jobs for Hoosiers, good careers.
And that's each year, right?
That's each year.
Each year.
And so that's huge.
Right.
And in order to get there, retention is critical. It's not okay to just enroll students. We have to retain them, and we have to become the community college they need us to be. Not the one we want to be, the one they need us to be. And in everything we do, it's leveraging technology, it's changing our processes, it's changing when and how and modalities that we do things by, and just saying we're going to continue to change as our students need us to change.
I want to ask you about the telltale signs of an institution that serves working learners. You mentioned that, hey, we're not serving, necessarily a traditional student population, 18, graduated from high school, full-time enrollment. You're talking about people they have a lot of different responsibilities, and among those responsibilities is working. So what are the telltale signs of that institution that says, hey, we care and we prioritize these working learners?
Well, you're going to see our classes are going to be offered at whatever time of the day that is needed by students. So many times our parking lots are fullest in the evening, right? All day long, but all evening, weekends as needed. We will offer online and hybrid. So we would love to have every one of our students be in person, but we know that's not possible for them. Right. If they're going to do higher ed, we have to give them modalities that will work for them, and then we have to create that online experience in which they will succeed. So it has to be excellent at a very high level. So we see our students taking all of the above, in person, hybrid, and hybrid would mean they might come to class once a week or once every other week. Yep. We are 8-week classes. We don't do 16 because, oh, by the way, adults do better in a shorter time frame, right? We see 5% higher pass rates, 3% lower drop rates, and had to just say to faculty, look, it would be malpractice if we stayed in 16 weeks knowing that our students perform better in that shorter time frame, fewer classes, shorter time frame, so that they can see their progress and life doesn't get in the way. So the modalities change, the knowing that they may be in several modalities at any time, so online as well as in person. And then just certainly continuing to serve them virtually. They may do their advising appointment on Zoom, but we also welcome them in. I think community colleges can be the best of all worlds. We can give them the in-person, personalized, come let us support you, tutoring, etc. on campus, and we can give you the kind of flexibility you need to be able to be an adult, working, children, other responsibilities, and still succeed.
I love the 8-week setup for working learners. Have you had some pretty tremendous feedback on that from your students?
Oh, students, yes. Well, traditional age students had to go, what? 8 weeks? They were used to 16. Adults absolutely love it. And once a student does 8 weeks, they're like, oh my gosh, it seems way too long to be in class for 16 weeks, right? So they love it then. It took the longest time, as you might imagine, helping faculty make that shift. We had to help them. They had to redesign courses. They had to think differently about it. Assignments had to look different. So it took us 4, almost 5 years to make that. Now we're 85% 8-week courses. There are a few, I've always said, if the data shows that 16 weeks is better for a student, we will do it in 16 weeks. And occasionally an accreditation will require because of the way clinicals or other things happen. But the majority of our courses, unless you can show us a reason why another length is better, our data almost always shows 8 weeks is best.
I think that a telltale sign of an institution that serves students first is that faculty might need to adjust to the needs of students, as opposed to students always needing to adjust to the needs of faculty.
Correct.
Does that? Yeah. I think I've seen that.
Yeah, that is right. And I think in community colleges, the faculty who are attracted to community college usually do lean towards students. Sometimes we just have to nudge them to lean a little more.
Yeah,
because they look at their 4-year colleagues and they're going like, well, they don't have to do that. They don't have to teach at night. They don't have to. it's just a reminder, look, we serve students who really need us to come alongside them, and we want them to succeed. We celebrate when we can get 80 or 90% success, right? Pass rates
Right.
and retention rates
Right.
and completions, right? We celebrate getting our students to a completion so they can do and have a better life. And I think sometimes that gets lost. We just have to remind.
Right, right. Well, okay, so Ivy Tech's doing some really great things, and you have shown you're doing it at, I would say, scale. I mean, you have Indiana, the entire state that you're serving, and you have, urban population centers, you have rural outreach and facilities. And so you do have that, and there are many issues that you can address that single institutions can't address. And then there's even a bigger scale, and that's at a national scale. So I want to transition to kind of the work of the President's Forum and what that means at a national scale. Tell me about an issue in higher education that can't be solved by one institution, one that needs multiple innovative institutions pressing on that to make sure that it gets addressed appropriately.
There's a couple, but let me start with one for sure. One is we serve national employers, and they'd like to have and I'll use the one that's almost there, which would be nursing. If you're hiring a nurse, you want the nurse to have the same training across the entire nation, right? And so if I'm a manufacturing company, Cummins, for instance, headquartered in Indiana, but I have locations across the nation, I'd like to be able to skill up my workforce in those same programs. I'd like to know if it's an Industry 4.0 program, that it's the same one in that other state as it is in Indiana. And I think the President's Forum has the opportunity to create some of these more national credentials that meet those large-scale employers. And I think if they support the large scale, they'll probably support the medium and small as well. But we could do better instead of thinking that every college, see, we've already experienced scale at Ivy Tech, which means all 19 campuses have those same programs. Well, why can't we do that at a broader scale? And see, I think that's really important. And then secondly, is just transferable credits across all of our institutions, that those adult learners that so many of us serve, they should never lose credit because they moved, they've taken that job across the country with their employer, and now they're going to another institution, losing credit. It should not look like that. That currency should be much more standard. And I believe we, as large institutions that cover over 1 million students, can begin to create the ways that works and model that working across large institutions and across state lines.
That's an issue for working learners, that they, having that non-transferable credit or credit loss it's a killer for learners who are engaged and working, and then they have to move, or they have a change in life circumstance that requires them to stop and start somewhere else. And then there's a credit loss, and then there's more time and money that have to go back into it. Yeah, that one is an absolute killer for our working learners. We have to work together on solving that.
Well, and can I give you the third one? The third one is just that this President's Forum, being innovative institutions, I'd love for us, and I think we are, going to continue to push higher ed to operate like Ivy Tech. Our strategic plan is higher education at the speed of life. I think we can help demonstrate to higher ed that we can, in fact, operate at a much faster speed to be responsive to the needs of our economies, of employers, and students.
It is unbelievable how slow education traditionally has functioned and how out of sync with the workforce and workforce signals. It's time that we decide, that everybody decides to move at the speed of life, right? Where we where we're responding to needs when they're needed and not 3 years after they're needed and we first receive the signal.
Correct. And that's what employers, especially as we look at onshoring, so many jobs in semiconductors and batteries and biotech, AI, right? I mean, all these things that are, we have to be prepared, and our students are ready to gain the most, right? We can give them these great opportunities in these new and emerging careers and industries, which will pay above median wages. They will be good incomes, great careers, and the future of our nation is counting on.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about collaboration amongst the institutions. Is there anything in the policy arena in Washington, D.C. that our institutions should be focused on? Is there anything that you would say, hey, this is a collaborative issue that we all need to contribute to solving?
Well, I think that I've really appreciated the work we've been doing on short-term Pell in making sure that it's available. And can we go further into blurring the line between skills training and credit? Because that's what our employers want, those certifications. Why is that anything less higher ed than credit, right? So, and, helping to ensure that federal financial aid responds to that adult working learner as well as the traditional 18-year-old. It's intended for both, but how are we leveraging that at every time? I think it is really incumbent on President's Forum to help illuminate to Congress and others, USDOE, USDOL, what does higher education really look like today? Because we know the traditional four-year lobbyists are really trying to hold on to the vision of what higher ed used to be, four-year residential, et cetera. Yet we know the majority of students in post-secondary are in fact adult learners, part-time, looking much more like the students we serve. And so I think helping to bring that voice in and for Congress to see us as a partner in refining those policies is incredibly important. But look, the work on FAFSA simplification, though we could all argue how simplified it still is, but those are all important. We're going to affirm, we're going to help, we're going to support, but in every way trying to help them respond to the learner that's there today, not the learner of 20 years ago.
I mean, I think this is a consistent theme and something that the President's Forum has prioritized, and that is working learners need different tools and different approaches than a traditional learner that our institutions have. I don't know why it's taken so long to identify that we're misaligned with the population that most needs education today. But we are, and we're in a spot where I think we've reacted to institution needs and faculty needs over learner needs, and we're now, bringing that voice to Congress, to the executive branch, to say it's time to prioritize working learners above everything else.
Well, and the truth is, whether we're talking about state houses or in Congress, most of the people sitting in the seats went through traditional higher ed. They were 4-year comprehensives or research ones in their communities, residential campuses. They didn't experience it. I didn't experience it till I did my doctorate, and I had a 2-year-old and then a second child. And all of a sudden I understood what it felt to be a working learner, trying to juggle all of these things of life. And I was privileged. We had, a spouse and good income. I could only begin to imagine the challenge of a single parent learner, right? Working 40, 50 hours, trying to be with the kids, take care of homework, and go to school to have a better life, right? So that's what drives me every day, and why I think it's so important in our work together. We design post-secondary for the real learners, those who are at, and look, in Indiana alone, we have 2 million, I have 2 million adults in the workforce who need some post-secondary. They have high school or less. That's incumbent on us. So yes, we have 80 to 100,000 high school students graduating every year, but 2 million adults. So can you get the scale of that? That's the piece that in America we need to grapple with, the millions, tens of millions of Americans who, but for a high quality certification, certificate, or degree, would have opportunities to take care of their families, to have a great career, and to improve the economy of our nation. It's a win so many times around, and we just have a few more policies to try to line up.
We're getting closer. Okay, we know that your schedule is just totally packed today, so we want to respect that time that you have for other things. Let's get to our lightning round. We're going to go quickly through 10 questions. Okay, 10 questions that'll educate all of our listeners about the way that Sue Ellspermann sees the world. Okay.
It's kind of scary.
Okay, here we go. What's the most important habit that learners should develop?
Ask for help. No one expects you to know it all.
If you weren't limited by resources, what education passion project would you pursue?
Childcare.
Explain that.
On every campus, I would have drop-in childcare. We have it on a couple. It's very expensive. We're not funded for it. How do we get there? It is critical that those students and their kids have that opportunity.
I want the resource limitation lifted so you can do that, but we're
working on it.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, number 3. What professions other than yours would you like to attempt? If you weren't a university president, what would you want to be doing?
I've done a lot of them, but I always tell my team here, if I didn't have this job, I would want to be a career coach. I love helping young and adults figure out, what do you want to do with your life? Like, we have assessments. I've had the privilege to see a lot of careers and love to help people figure out where they're going next. So yeah, career coach. Great. They may see me hanging around here after I retire just for free.
Well, great response, and kind of, at a macro level, what you're doing, making sure that everybody has these connections to careers. Yeah. Okay. What active president of another institution do you admire and why?
I think he knows this. Greg Williams at Odessa College, who introduced us to 8-week courses. He also introduced us to the student commitments of how you really become student-centered, and I owe a lot to Greg.
I'd like to meet Greg one day. That sounds like an innovative mindset. Okay, what's the best book that you've read in the last year?
Covey's always good. Speed of Trust. I'll leave it with that. We've gotten to really implement 40X in our organization, but trust is so important, and I love what Covey does. Nobody does it better than Covey.
Okay, all right, that's a good endorsement. Outside of work, what do you do in your free time?
I have 9 grandkids and a husband who feels neglected. So it's grandkids followed by husband.
It's family. You're spending time with family.
We are very blessed.
What piece of advice would you give your younger self?
I always thought you had to do it all at once. I think as people live longer, we can take a little more time to try to do it all. So you have more time than you think.
That's I'm sure that's part of the advice you could give as a career coach as well.
Yes.
That's something that is very helpful. Okay, what has been your best day as the president of Ivy Tech?
I always say every day at community college is a pretty darn good day because you're just getting to do the really important work. But I think any time that I get to spend with a student as they're either getting close to being placed or commencement, alumni, when you get to hear the how did what they got here change their lives, that's It doesn't really get any better than that.
That's going to be a hard one to beat. I can imagine that most of our institution presidents will say graduation day is pretty, it's a pretty,
Yeah.
there's a lot of passion there. It's where you see a payoff of all the hard work that's gone on, not only by the individual who's there, but also by, it culminates a lot of work from your team that's helped them to get there.
We say it's not just about graduation day, but every day after. And
Right.
that's what I think we're really preparing people for, that every day after.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Okay, tell me an innovation outside of education that you love, something that we haven't had around forever, but now that we have it, it would be hard to live without.
GPS. If I didn't have it on my car, I don't know how I got anywhere before. I plug in my phone. As soon as I get in the car, I've got my GPS on, because you know there's going to be a wreck somewhere. Lots of times I find out there's a better way than I thought. And I love knowing what minute I'm going to arrive. And it's incredible how accurate they are.
Don't you hate when you jump in and you're going somewhere that you don't need GPS and you don't plug it in to,
Yep.
and then you get down the road and you get into a traffic jam that you should have driven out of a while back?
And then yes, and you feel so stupid. Like, why didn't
why?
I knew to turn it on? Why didn't I?
Yeah, that one's a good one. That's a great innovation. Okay, so if you could take this is one that give us an insight into your personality a little bit. If you could take a class from any expert, living or dead, what's the class and who's the instructor?
So I was blessed to have a mentor politically in Senator Richard Lugar, and he was just such an esteemed, bipartisan, high integrity leader for Indiana for many years, mayor of Indianapolis, then senator for decades in Congress, and incredible. I had the privilege of spending a couple hours with him just talking political civility and how do you really get things done. I would love to have a whole class. He passed about 5 years ago, but I would love to have had the opportunity to truly study under him, to say how might we move our nation forward, move our communities forward, our states forward with more bipartisanship, with civility, and to really live up to our Constitution.
Now that is something that we really, really need, and a great way to end the podcast. Thanks for joining us today, Sue. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Wes.
Many thanks to President Sue Ellspermann for making time to join us today. Remember, you can subscribe to our podcast on YouTube for a full video version or for the audio wherever you get your podcasts. Please join us for our next episode as we discuss innovation as measured by student success. We call it accountable innovation. After all, the only thing that truly matters is the success of our students.